Okay, let us talk about Ricky. Uh,
And let me see. Is it recording again? It's recording again. Let me verify again just to be sure.
nope, absolutely.
And we are. Good stuff.
Okay, great.
I always like when things work like they're supposed to.
Always do.
All right.
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
Hello, this is GammaCast, and I am your host, Dave. And online, I've got my co-host.
Charlie Esser. Ahoy.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about Season 2, Episode 3, titled Ricky. The director was Frank Orsatti. Writer was Jason Summers. Original air date, October 6, 1978. Location is New Mexico. See the synopsis. David takes a job at an auto racing track, helping out an aspiring race car driver and his mentally handicapped brother. Things turn ugly when a rival racing outfit tries to guarantee a second place finish for David's team. This one has a lot of great co-stars in it.
Yes.
So
You know which one I'm most excited about?
I'm going to guess Gerald McRaney.
Yes, the return of Gerald McRaney.
Yes.
He was in Death in a Family, parts 1 and 2, as our goon who was a good heart. Our goon with a good heart who wanted what was best for the daughter, but didn't know that the evil cabal was working against him. So it was interesting to see him move from that to this character who is just out and out evil.
Right. Yeah, just absolutely evil.
Mm-hmm.
The co-star that I liked is
Mm-hmm.
James Doughton, who's Greg Marmalard from Animal House.
Mm.
So he was the what was his character name? Buzz Detter or Dieter.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Our handsome race driver. Yes.
Yes. And then his brother Ricky is played by Mickey Jones. And then we
Mm-hmm.
know Mickey Jones from actually a movie that I know him the best from is Tin Cup, which had Kevin Costner, Rene Russo in it.
Yeah.
He's one of Kevin Costner's regular followers or entourage, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was really cool. And then the other good one that was in there is Gordon Jump. He's in there as kind of the guy that runs the racetrack. So,
Yes.
and we know him from WKRP.
Yes.
So a lot of good people playing around in this episode, but
And
just
wasn't he also the child molester on Different Strokes? Or am I misremembering my 80s there?
boy, I would have to go back into my knowledge of
Yeah.
Different
The
Strokes. That's been
the
way too
bike shop
long.
owner. I thought he did a guest shot on that as the bike shop owner, and yeah.
You're actually right. He Different
Yes.
Strokes, Mr. Horton, the Bicycle Man, Part 1 and 2. Very good,
Oh
Charlie.
yes. Oh yeah. No, I know my Gordon Jump. He's actually he's a great character actor and
Yeah.
he's great at playing the balding middle-aged guy who does things and as Jeffrey Tambor will tell you, there's always a role for the balding middle-aged guy because Jeffrey Tambor started playing the balding middle-aged guy at 22, and
Yeah,
there was a lot of work for that.
yeah, Gordon Jump. I even liked him in Soap, if you remember
Oh,
that movie, that TV show.
Oh, I love Soap. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's a chief of police Tinkler.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
There's a rewind show we should do at some point.
So, let's see. Going on talking about the episode Ricky.
Mhm.
I get the impression that you're not a fan of this episode, Charlie.
Not at all. Not at all. First off, okay. So first off, just on a technical aspect, this is another one of much like Earthquake or Earthquakes Happen, where it is a lot of stock footage with somebody announcing things over the stock footage to make it look like there's a story going on. The Demolition Derby very much is that, and some of the racing similarly. You can tell that it's like, I'm going to give a lot of exposition now. Well, we watched this stock footage of a race from some completely different movie, and that was so that from a technical aspect, every time they go to that, it's always a little like but then again, I guess they went to Hawaii in the season premiere. Now they got to make their budget back. So
Right.
next time, just have the hypnotist work in Connecticut, I guess, is the response. But beyond that, I kind of felt the whole way they depicted Ricky was kind of just so tropey and so cliched. And at some point, when Gerald McRaney and his brother are manipulating him, I just wanted Ricky to look at him and say, "Hey, look, I'm retarded. I'm not stupid." That the complete lack of emotional intelligence, and that's the thing, is that when someone has a mental handicap, most often they actually do have an adequate amount of emotional intelligence. It's just hard learning aspects that they tend to have difficulties with. Now, some people can be very trusting because they've been raised in very trusting environments, but I don't necessarily see that that's what Ricky was raised in per se. I think Ricky has been around the track for a while, so I think when someone starts feeding him a line of bull, I would think he should be able to see through it a little better. But obviously the writers did not agree. And then the whole other thing with the school for arts, although I liked it as a concept, I guess I just didn't necessarily understand why the brother necessarily wouldn't have wanted to have his brother go to this school, and two, why I didn't necessarily understand what the controversy necessarily was there. So it just seemed a little pat for me, a little it seemed a little feel good, and you talk about an episode in which the Hulk is superfluous. This is definitely a superfluous Hulk episode.
Well,
I mean, yeah,
I agree with what you're saying around the school thing. I don't understand why that would have been a dramatic decision, for his brother. I figure that would have been this is going to help my brother, and I'm going to go along with it. But I think your problem with the Sam and Ted Roberts, where they were manipulating Ricky, they were playing the card correctly, because the whole time that they tried to manipulate Ricky, they're using this is going to help your brother. This is for, this is going to help him get along to what he wants, to make him successful. Don't you want to be helpful to him? Don't you want to see him succeed? So I think they played that really well as far as, the how they were manipulating Ricky. Now, obviously, us knowing what we're seeing, and we can associate the fact that it's not the first time these brothers would have been doing this kind of thing to to Buzz and Ricky. But you're right, there should have been something a little more awareness there of maybe Buzz should have given a little more life lesson to Ricky to say, all right, anything that comes from these guys, don't even trust them. But
well, I guess what I might say is I think that one of the things that I felt was lacking in this show was was acting to tell a scene rather than just having so much have to be relied on cliche. So, for example, take like the whole drama of Ricky going to this school. There actually, I can see the arguments that could be there. There is this idea of, hey, he's family. We take care of family. We're not just going to ship him off to some institution, because they had mentioned that Ricky had some issues with state-run institutions, and I know, from family history, that some of those places back then were really horrible. There is this whole thing of Greystone out here in New York that was like just a horror show. It was called Greystone, but and that is, and so I get that, and they could have touched on that. It's like, what it is they kind of tried to, here's what it is, and we often talk about how they tend to do like genre episodes, like, they'll do the trucker episode, they'll do the boxer episode, they're going to do the disaster, the earthquake episode. This is very much the race car, this is very much the race movie episode. There are all these B genre films that that you had in the late 70s and 80s and 60s, even, where you would just you had this set formula that you went through, and these characters that you would see there, and they are sort of utilizing all these films and all these tropes. But I kind of feel like they are also trying to maybe make some kind of a social statement, but they're not. They're not giving themselves enough time to in this episode. So it's like, I think they wanted to make. So I think someone came up with this idea. Oh, well, we've got all this stock car footage. Let's do a race car driver episode. And they say, okay, that sounds great. And then someone says, oh, well, one of the tropes in one of these things, you'll have the man-child brother who has to be cared for. And so, okay, yeah, that's great. But then someone says, because of course at this time this is in the news, that, well, we really should do something about the mentally disabled's right to autonomy and all this kind of stuff, and they probably were trying to put too many layers into it, and as a result they didn't have enough time to explore any of them well enough. And that's what I would say really fell apart for this. And for what it's worth, there is actually this implication here that Ricky has a real problem with impulse control, that Ricky is easily self-destructive in his behaviors, as we see from the very first Hulk out, where he locks himself in the garage and starts playing in the car, which he knows he's not supposed to do, and nearly dies if it hadn't been for the Hulk,
Right.
And that's the thing there, is that the Hulk saves him, and of course nobody believes him, but and clearly Ricky has this problem. Ricky has this problem of he needs to be watched. Because really, literally, every time they leave Ricky alone, something horrible happens.
Yes.
Whether Gerald McRaney and his brother are manipulating him or not, just on his own, he's going to go and do trouble. Which is why, when they find the epoxy in the carburetor, they don't, no one ever, they immediately look to him, because it's like, yeah, that's something you would have done. You would have been playing with the epoxy and you would have squirted it all in the carburetor, because, that's the kind of thing you've been doing, Ricky, your whole life.
But let's not get too far ahead. There was a situation there where after the Hulk saves Ricky, they have the soda machine. So they had that whole interaction where the soda machine's broken. The Hulk realizes that Ricky needs something to drink after he had, gotten all that inhalation of carbon monoxide. So he rips off the front of the soda machine in order to so Ricky can help himself. But then Ricky has this moment where he has to teach the Hulk how to open up a can of soda. Now the part that is great to me is the pull tab part. I completely had forgotten about pull tabs. From way back when. But thank you for that memory. For the producers and writers of the Incredible Hulk, I appreciate that, brought back to the pull tab world. But they had that can of soda, and so what did you think about that exchange? I mean, because once again we had not the Bill Bixby, but the Lou Ferrigno moment where he got a chance to act.
Yeah, and that was great, and it's great to see that. Actually, one of the things I was actually going to say is that, because what I thought you were going to go in there was referencing the fact that when Ricky gives the Hulk his grape soda, he tells the Hulk, "Okay, now I have to pay for this because we're taking an extra."
Oh yeah, that's right.
And puts
Yes.
the extra quarter in there, which was a very interesting thing that, showed that, which I guess maybe was part of my complaint about it, was that it seemed like Ricky had more awareness than they necessarily. He had situational awareness where when the situation called for it, he could be aware of, the nuances of life, and then when when it wouldn't help the story, they just took that away. And I kind of felt like, Ricky was in a rough spot there. And again, like I say, there seemed to be a lot of points in this where they kind of tried to jump ahead in the story, but they never really gave much development for it. Like even at the end, when Ricky is in the demolition derby, and they're saying, "Wow, he's actually driving great. It's like he was trained to do that," which is completely out of left field. That okay, Ricky is actually a really good driver as well. And it's like, okay, well, this might not be weird if you had like built to that, but instead we built to this idea that Ricky likes to build things or likes to make art, and in a way, it kind of reminds me a bit of the final round, where it's like, oh, the punch drunk boxer also is magically gifted for fixing cars. you know it's like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I just have this magic ability. And to that extent, I kind of feel like, Ricky's kind of being given this magic ability, but they don't really know what that magic ability is going to be. you know
Yeah, I think maybe that was kind of written in there just to the fact to kind of pay homage to the fact that, there's going to be other talents that Ricky has that can be appreciated, and so, where he might be lacking in other areas of emotional intelligence, but he's making up for it in the parts where he's artistic, or the parts that he maybe is a great demolition driver.
Yeah, and without a doubt, I'm sure that, like I said, I'm sure that's what they were going for. I just don't think they gave us a way to get there.
There
They
wasn't enough time to develop that.
Yeah, it's like they tried to do too many things, and I think they could have done one thing more. And honestly, I would say even just suggesting that Ricky was actually a pretty great driver might have been a pretty good thing to do, to show that Ricky could be his own man and show that he could be a driver. I think that would have actually even seemed less complex within the story, that these two brothers could then go on to be this team. you know Ricky does the demolition driving, your brother does the stock car. That they could actually have this thing where Ricky's brother where Buzz could start to see his brother not as this little kid he had to take care of his whole life, but as a brother and a partner in the journey that they're both on. You know, and what you kind of move off to is kind of what you wind up with is, oh, we're just going to put Ricky in this institutional school. And even though we just revealed this other thing that Ricky could do that would allow him to be a part of our life, we're just going to put him over here because it works out better for the story, I guess, or at least whatever the writer wanted the story to be.
Yeah,
um
I would think that if you left or explored that world of him being a demolition driver a little bit too long, then you're like, okay, well, we're just going to set up a situation where Ricky is going to potentially get hurt in the future, and I think that might have been the reason why we didn't go down that road too long.
yeah,
It
well,
was
but
just
I
kind of
guess
introduce the fact of here's another skill that he has and where he might be superior in these other areas, but
yeah.
we're not going to spend too long on that because it's dangerous.
Well, yeah, but I guess what I might have said is that, you kind of start off establishing this idea that Ricky wants to be a driver,
Right.
because we first see him in the car.
You're right.
And if
You're right.
we
We did
go
see
with
that.
this, we could have explored that as his emotional arc, rather than throwing into a little side thing about him making the saddlebags for the little giraffe he made. Which was a cute little thing to do too. And and it is a skill for him to have, but I guess maybe if you're going to do that, then you don't need to have him nearly kill himself in the car. Maybe you explore him more as the artistic soul. It's like they're kind of trying to do too many things, I guess, and which is what I would say about this film is that they try to do too many. This episode is they try to do too many things and they wind up accomplishing none of them.
I gotcha. I do want to give a shout out to the mechanic, Irene. Easy on the eyes, actress Robin Matson.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the when they can give us a strong female character. She didn't have a lot of activity going on other than just being the go-to bona fide mechanic for the group, and she did it well.
Yeah, well, what I liked about her is that she wasn't a love interest for David. That you have a female who is, I mean, granted, she is someone else's love interest, but she's not the protagonist's love interest. She actually has an autonomy and a capability all her own outside of her romantic relationship to the primary character of the series, which is, I think this is the first time where we really had a female like that, who
Right.
wasn't either, being taken under David's wing or manipulating David for her own purposes. That this was one person a woman whom David does not have a relationship with. And that was an interesting take on that.
Very true. Very true. We did not have a love interest for or any kind of love thing going on with David in this episode. We didn't have Jack McGee.
We did not. And that I think really, another thing that hurts this episode is that we don't have what I think is our primary source of tension in this show, which is Jack McGee. It's like it does not have Jack. Even after the first Hulk out, we don't even get the hint that Jack McGee is coming around, which means that David doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to run or hide. He could just stick around. But I think that that's the central conflict of it. And I guess they didn't put it in there because they already had so many other things they've already jammed into this episode. But I think that kind of squelches David's motivation in certain ways. If there's not a Jack McGee after him, then then why does David have to move on? Even after the whole second Hulk out, he's like, well, I have to move on. He says to Ricky, but we haven't even seen Jack McGee yet.
Right.
I guess maybe he wants to stay ahead of him, but then why didn't he try to stay ahead of him after the first Hulk out? Except for, I guess, the fact that nobody really believed him, and the second Hulk out was way more public.
Right. There was definitely a lot of motivation after the first Hulk out because of the damage to the car, and he had to make sure he was going to help get that repaired and get it going again. But going to Hulk out number 2, that one reminded me a lot of the trucker episode because we had David behind the wheel again. In this case, it was the car that he stole from one of the Roberts brothers. To go into the demolition derby. He gets he kind of gets pinned in the car, and that's when he sees things going wrong for Ricky, and of course he wants to save Ricky. And then that causes the Hulk out moment where he's got to pretty much. I think if I remember right, he bent the steering column like right out.
I
Ripping
think
the wheel off. Ripping the wheel off right off the steering column. Gets himself free. He tosses the demolition car of one of the evil brothers.
Yeah, Joe McCraney.
Yeah, Joe McCraney. And in this case, he kind of flips it over so that it actually is pinning him, which could have actually really killed a person. The Hulk could have been responsible for a death there. And then, he makes his way over to Ricky to get him free. And then, of course, that's when everybody, at that point, it's a very visible Hulk moment. Right.
Yeah. I thought it was I don't know if it was an intentional parallel, but I kind of saw it was, when Ricky at the very beginning of it tries to rip the door off of Gerald McCraney's car, when he gets into the accident. I thought that was, maybe an interesting parallel there,
Right.
They definitely were, again, going into this trope of, people with intellectual disabilities might have, near superhuman strength as well. It's just there's a lot of cliches that were very common in the 1970s, 80s, and 80s, and they don't age well, is what I'll say.
So let me ask you about the situation with the button.
Hmm.
Ricky had this button that has name on it, and for some reason it was like very important to Ricky to have this button. But then at the end, when he loses the button, his brother says, "You don't need it anymore." Uh,
Well, it
what was that
wasn't
about?
just a okay. Well, it wasn't just a button with his name on it. It was a button with his name, so it said Ricky, so you knew who he was, and then it had a picture of his brother's car,
Okay.
so that so long as he's around the racetrack, everyone's gonna know. Oh, you're with Buzz Dietrich. They knew where he belonged, and it was sort of this is so that if Ricky ever wanders away, which obviously he's having problems with, he could always find his way back because he knew that that car was where he was supposed to be at, the blue number 10 car. And when he says you don't need it anymore, what he was saying is, I don't need to take care of any of you anymore. You're more capable than I've admitted that you are. And in some ways kind of saying I've been holding you back, Ricky.
Right.
And you don't need to be coddled in that way anymore. And that is, to some extent a nice take on it. But you know, like I said, I'm sure as a young man watching it and loving a demolition derby as much as anybody, I probably loved it a lot. But unlike other episodes which stick with you for a lifetime, this one didn't stick with me at the time, and it's still. I can see why. I can see what was missing in it as far as story. And I think that just needed more story to really. I think that there's stuff that was there that could have been potentially great, but that they just didn't develop enough in its own direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, is that your final thoughts on the episode?
Yeah, I mean that'd be my final thought on it. It's not bad. We get the return of Gerald McRaney, which is great, and I did like Gerald McRaney in this. I like the way that he had the beard in this, which sort of like differentiates his character from the last episode he was in. And honestly, Gerald McRaney, he plays the straight laced tough guy pretty good, but he also plays a great dirt ball, and this was a great dirt ball role for Gerald McRaney.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of James Doughton in this episode. And of course, that
Hmm.
was, like I said, Greg Marmalard from Animal House. And this goes back to the credit that about the only positive thing I was saying about the fighter episode or the final round was, where we had a iconic person from a movie, but because they were iconic by being a jerk. In this case, what I'm used to him as Greg Marmalard from Animal House being just a complete jerk to the Deltas, but in
Hmm.
this role, he was so completely different and believable to me.
Yeah.
And I really thought he did a really great way, even though I believe this may have been probably around the same time frame as Animal House, I'm guessing.
Yeah, probably about. He was
Yeah,
probably going from one set to the next.
right. So
Um,
so to have those varying roles at the same time and being able to do them both so well, I'm giving a lot of credit to this to James Dalton
yeah.
as an actor.
Well, what you have there is the fact that he hadn't had this other iconic role yet. And so people are going to cast him as the nice guy. After that, they may not cast him as much because they're always going to be thinking of the Marmalade role.
Right. And of course we had Gordon Jump. So I'm definitely
Hmm.
a big fan of Gordon Jump, like his work. So a lot of the things that I liked about this episode was what it sounds like is the co-stars. I have a big appreciation for that. I like the moments where we had Lou Ferrigno interacting
Hmm.
with Ricky. The whole thing with the soda pop. pop top thing. I thought that was really kind of, well done and fun to watch the interaction. So I'm probably giving this one probably a little higher up than you are.
Yeah.
And because I mean there was a lot of just a lot of good nostalgic moments around the episode, and so I'm giving a pass to a lot of what's missing from it. And a lot of what's missing is what I complained in the past, is lack of Jack McGee and lack of him being able to forward his trying to fix himself from being the Hulk. But at the same time, you're right, where the situation that we kind of put himself into in this episode, was did it really need an Incredible Hulk? And this is definitely one that doesn't really seem like it really warranted an Incredible Hulk type moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But for me, I thought it was the message that they were trying to convey with someone that has a mental challenge, has other traits or abilities that they should be recognized for. And I think that's what this was trying to convey, and I think they did that as well as they could, provided everything else that they were trying to squeeze into the episode. What about your social media credentials, Charlie?
Okay, so if you would like to tweet along with me when I live tweet The Incredible Hulk at 7 o'clock Eastern Time on MeTV on Saturdays when I can, please feel free to do so at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEesser, for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. And of course, you can always write to me at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. And of course, listen to my other podcasts on the Southgate Media Network, on the Nuff Said feed, all new Marvel Roundup, and of course, Super Connectivity.
All right. What I want to do real quick is I want to do another shout out. Previous episode, I did this for another one of our series that's on our 80s Reboot channel, but there's also a TV show called The Americans. We have an ongoing series where called Comrades, where co-hosts Jesse and Allie are breaking down each episode of The Americans. So if you get a chance, you're a fan of that TV show, please give that a listen. And they're very entertaining, and they'll have a lot of great stories to go along with the episodes. So I really encourage you to listen to them.
Yeah, I just listened to the last episode of that, and it was really a great episode to listen to. So highly recommend that the Comrades podcast.
Sweet. And I'm Dave, so I take care of our 80s Reboot social media accounts, and that Facebook is facebook.com/80sreboot. Twitter is at 80sreboot. Tumblr is 80sreboot.tumblr.com. And then also check out our blog. That's at southgatemediagroup.com/80srebootblog. And I don't remember if I said it already, but you can email us at 80sreboot@gmail.com. So we appreciate you hulking out with us, and everybody have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night. We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.